Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Ben, better known by my podcasting and pen name Zoob the Mad. I created Render as a form of catharsis. You see, I have a bit of a complicated relationship with horror. I've had nightmares and night terrors throughout my entire life. Some of my earliest memories were waking up to said nightmares. One of my first memories that I can remember is waking up hitting winter boots in my bedroom closet with a wiffle ball bat because I thought the boogeyman lived in there. So that's all right. You can laugh. It's kind of funny actually. But well, there are a few far less funnier examples. Ghosts hovering over me as I lie in bed at 3 a.m. Giant spidery things with large appendages clinging to shadowed corners of my bedroom. Twisted sculptures strangling me as I lie frozen under the covers, helpless. These are normal things to me. Waking terrors that come like a thief in the night and steal precious sleep when I least expect it. I'd like to think of it as a fun little game of terror bingo, where what sort of horrific aberrations will follow me tonight? Um, as you can see, my relationship with horror is kind of a lemonades from lemon situation. That's not to say I don't love it as a genre. We'll get to that in a second. I think it's always hard. It's always why. Yeah, scratch that. Rewind the tape. I think that's why I've always harbored a fascination with the horror genre. It's an attempt to make sense of my situation, to explore what others experience, and compare it to my own. That exploration is probably why I have come to love the genre so much. Paradoxically, watching horror movies, reading horror novels, and interacting with all forms of interactive media, video games, offers such tremendous, almost cathartic relief from my own sporadic nightmares. It reminds me that I'm not alone in these dark visions, that there are others, just like me, that experience such things and are inspired to make something of it. Render is one such concentrated nightmare. It was inspired by the dreamlike state we find ourselves in when trauma makes reality slip away from us. It's an exploration of what happens when the world as we know it contorts into something else, something far beyond our understanding. I made the main character Charles a college student because it's one of the most formative stages of our life. It's a time of new beginnings, new opportunities, a time where we must discover who we are and iron out who we want to become. As a result, it's a time that's both liberating and terrifying. At this point in time, I'm not going to get into the weeds about Charles, nor his eccentric, almost picturesque hometown that serves as the backdrop of the novel. I would like to instead talk about what inspired this monstrosity of a book, one that took a year of fevered writing and revision to complete, that consumed me in a self-imposed hell of my own design. I first encountered the holographic principle, one of my major inspirations, as a downward spiral binge of YouTube videos. I forgot what got me there. It really doesn't matter at this point. But I remember the specific moment in which I discovered it. It was during a lengthy interview of a theoretical physicist named Sean Carroll from a channel that I watched called Lex Clips. In it, this doctor of theoretical physics discussed a number of topics on why reality, as we understand it, might not be exactly what we think it is. You see, the holographic principle started as an attempt to make sense of what happens within matter inside a black hole. If a ship disappears beyond the event horizon, does it stop existing? Or is it somehow preserved as it passes through the point of no return? Does that raw material, the stuff, the information it once was, cease to be? No, that'd be a violation of physics. You remember the laws of thermodynamics: energy cannot be created or destroyed, can only be transformed. That's the additional part of it. Not many people know that part. Can't say you haven't learned something tonight. Anyways, oh god. All right. Anyways, that was a member of the audience commenting on the side. My mother. Okay. So something must happen to that ship, right? Even with the pressure of infinite atmospheres blending and tearing the existence of it, ripping it apart into near infinitesimal amounts of particles, something about it has to remain in some form, right? Dr. Carroll refers to that state of distorted shipness, the stuff from which it was once made, as raw information, data that somehow must endure despite its unfortunate and very violent transformation. It's currently thought that information within a black hole is spread out as a thin disk in which every element absorbed by it is shattered across it, creating a digital blend of pure information that is as intact as it is scattershot across the totality of its entire spectrum. This scattering, as it were, contains within it potentially everything that has ever existed or has occurred in some form within the universe. Think of every type of photon, every type of quark, every type of other microparticle that has ever existed within the full scale of our, 13.8 billion years of existence in this current universe? Perhaps within this black hole lies the very origins of where this nightmare stems. This holographic principle suggests that there are known limits, that our preconceived notions of things terminating into definitive points within our universe might just be human convention. What stops a black hole from infinitely expanding? Why do we believe that there are constraints within it? Who's to say that we're not already in one, right now? As we speak, on 6:09 p.m. in the South Hadley Public Library. If that's the case, what kind of shape really is our universe? If everything within a black hole is the stretching of already existing and available data that has existed, will exist, and has ever existed, right? Perhaps that very nature of everything as we know it is just raw bits of data, scattershot and reorganized into various forms that are currently standing right here in Massachusetts. I pause for dramatic effect. That wasn't in the script. Just a little bit of levity. I know that was kind of heavy, so wanted to give you an opportunity to laugh. All right. Anyways, so perhaps everything, in fact, is a hologram. Just a mere projection ideas plastered onto a giant blank canvas on which reality truly resides. So, this holographic principle, this philosophical principle, with the backing of cutting-edge theoretical physics, isn't really new when it comes to the human experience as an idea. It's just a new form of a very old argument that plucks at the strings of how we perceive reality. I can name a bunch of them. Plato's allegory of the cave, for example, suggests that we are observers of a shadow puppet play projected from a flame that sits in the back of a large cave. He goes on further to suggest that what we see are mere hollow projections, imperfect replications of perfect forms that reside out of time, idealized versions of ness that represent the underlying idea of what it's trying to represent. For example, this is a copy of Render, a horror novel that I created. However, it is not the perfect form of Render. There is a book, Plato argues, in the realm of forms, where there is an idealized version of this book that didn't tear my hair out for a year on end, as I desperately tried to get it published, and ultimately did. But this is just a hollow representation of the real thing, which exists somewhere else. This microphone I'm using, for example, I'm using to record this presentation, doesn't really exist, to further the analogy. It's a manifestation, a shadow of the divine microphone-ness that it represents. Somewhere, also in that realm of forms, lies this very instrument in its idealized form that is conceived and constructed by some master builder that is definitely not a representative of Logie Instruments. As a similar but different parallelism is the thought experiment Descartes' Demon. In the original thought experiment, René Descartes, a name I can pronounce, wonders if the world isn't some sick mirage created by some malevolent being designed to trick us into believing that this artificial world it constructed is the only reality that truly exists. Descartes goes on further, eliminating everything he can chalk up as conventional wisdom as a reductive argument to fundamentally understand what world exists if it does. And eventually comes to the conclusion that he must exist because he is conscious of the fact that he is in fact existing. This is where we get our famous line, cognito ergo sum, or, more commonly known, I think, therefore I am. This is also a parallelism to the vat in the jar hypothesis, a little bit more of a common, modern conception of this representation of solipsism, where all of us, appear to take up residence in a world that we've constructed on our own design, but in reality, we are sitting in a jar of pickles as a singular brain. I illustrate all these very strange, very metaphysical exercises in solipsism to highlight just how much energy we give these theories, to suggest that all of this is simply made up, that everything we see here is some sort of figment of our collective imaginations. It appears that we've been dwelling on this for quite some time. The holographic principle and similar computer simulation theory are just the latest answers to the age-old question of what if everything we know and experience isn't really as it seems? And in this, we reach the final version of this I'd like to discuss, which is the aforementioned computer simulation theory, and the crux of this horrific nightmare that I'm glad to be rid of. And I mean that in the sense that it's now on a page and not in my brain taking up space. Anyways, show of hands. How many have experienced a computer on the fritz? A malfunctioning computer. A computer on the fritz. Doesn't work. That's everyone here. Universal consensus. Maybe a phone glitching out, perhaps after a bunch of updates, or maybe after clicking something you really shouldn't have. Not judging. Yep, that all tracks. So, before doing this, talking to you, shilling my book, I hope you buy it. I was an IT professional for the better part of 18 years, and I'd expect at least half this room has called or will call tech support for a weird little problem with an electronic device in your near future. I'm sorry. Gods, Could you imagine if the world was just one big computer? That some sort of super device right now was running a simulation not only of all of us, but of entire countries, worlds, galaxies. I wonder, how many glitches would this universe experience with the sheer volume of information it needs to process in order to simulate the experience that we call life? For scale, science estimates that what between your ears can store about 2.5 petabytes of information. 2.5 petabytes. For those that don't understand the volume of this scale, 1 petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. That is 1,000 standard hard drives you can go to Best Buy to buy right now for the grand price of $90. You could get 1,000 of these bad boys, and that wouldn't even equate to half of what's between your ears. That is insane. That's just one brain alone. Could you imagine having to process 8 billion and counting? And that's just humanity. Holy crap, is that a lot of information? Literally mind-boggling. And that's just the Earth. Who knows how many other thinking creatures exist within our cosmic sprawl, just taking account of our minuscule neck of the universe. I'd imagine that's an absurd amount of raw data to keep track of. When I worked as an IT specialist, one of the most common problems was lost information. People deleted the wrong file. They put an icon in the wrong place and they couldn't find it anymore. That sort of thing. Another common problem was that they stored way too much data in one place, causing their computers to slow to an almost unproductive crawl. In fact, the more stuff they accumulated on their computer, the more problems I saw with their device. There is one issue that haunts me to this day. It was when I worked for a design company in Boston, and the lead designer walked over to me with a laptop that physically had seen much better days. He was in a full panic mode, ranting about this stupid piece of shit that wouldn't let him save his Word document, and that he was behind multiple days on a project that was supposed to be finished by week's end. I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. So I boot it up, have him log into the computer, and start investigating. It turns out that this person's entire hard drive was filled to the brim with useless junk. 300 gigabytes of storage space out of 300 gigabytes. It was a miracle that the thing even booted. The laptop was almost completely unresponsive, taking literal minutes to register a single mouse movement. I lost my place. No, I didn't. So, I turned to him and asked, how on earth did he get any work done? And that was a genuine question, because I was incredulous. As well as mentioning the little fact that I found out the source of his problem, there was no place left to save. He'd used it all up. Could you imagine how well that conversation went? Anyways, I'm taking a tall glass of water after reliving that nightmare. And people wonder why I don't work in IT anymore. I will never forget the words he said back to me in almost complete confidence. They still haunt me 10 years later. There's always space, he said almost sarcastically. That's what the internet's for. What? That was a genuine what. Like, I'm reliving this memory and just thinking of how nonsensical that was. Anyways, I digress. I point to this weird little problem that I had in a very small corner of Massachusetts to create an illustration. What if there isn't any more space? What if we exceeded the total memory that can reside within the giant cosmic computer and the sheer amount of stuff that the universe has to process on a minute-by-minute basis has bogged it down to a painful and almost horrific crawl. What if, by the very nature of information supersaturation, we've taxed our simulation to the point of breaking? 2.5 petabytes for one human brain. Again, times that by 8 billion and rising. That's just accounting for humanity alone. This world is filled with so much stuff, and not just people. How much more information is stored within a bug, a frog, a high-speed bullet train moving across country? It's dizzying to think about, isn't it? There's so much out there. So much within curious reach of our inquisitive little fingertips. We have the collective body of all human knowledge tucked within our jacket pockets. Look at this, for goodness sake. This is in here. 10,000 times, allegedly, what was contained within the Library of Alexandria. Allegedly, one of the greatest collective consortiums of books that has ever existed within human society. We use this to watch cat videos. Can you imagine how much more there is for the simulation to learn, to process? How many other possibilities, other skills, other modes of being there are that it needs to keep track of? It'd be a modern miracle for any universe to operate under these conditions. Even more so with minimal issues. Issues that wouldn't be out of sorts to take your friendly extraterrestrial tech support specialist as general concerns about your now malfunctioning universe. I digress from this discussion of existential nightmares to talk about another one. Self-publishing. Traditional publishing is highly competitive, as you might imagine. Sorry, I needed a drink of water. When I first wrote this novel, my goal was a catharsis, just to get the poison out, so to speak. Render was created during NaNoWriMo, a 1-month period where aspiring novelists are tasked to create a 50,000-word manuscript in just 30 days. 3-0. Having multiple projects in the works at any given time, NaNoWriMo was the ultimate way to ensure that something bubbled to the surface. And so I went to nanowrimo.org, registered myself as an author, and started cracking away. Render took about a year to complete, from its initial draft to its completed book. I didn't really flirt with the idea of traditional publication. I have my reasons. The goal was to always complete the whole process within a year, and the whole querying process can take several. Having experience with both industries, I have multiple short stories published within different anthologies, silentsparkpress.com. Where am I? Yes. Okay. Having experience with both industries, self-publication is quite different from traditional publishing. However, there are a few parallelisms. Contrary to what you might believe, most marketing and public relations are the responsibility of the author. An agent, if you're lucky to have one, exists mostly to get your foot in the door. Places that require a little bit more hands-on from middle management, if keep it glib. An agent may offer some ideas on how to market, but it ultimately relies on, guess who, to promote their own work. That was one of my motivations to self-publish. If I am to bear the brunt of getting this whole thing broadcasted to the rest of the world, I might as well learn the entire process from the ground up, because I'm a masochist, apparently. I wanted to understand every step of the process in a way that I hadn't bothered to learn before. When I submitted short stories to independent publications, such as Silent Spark Press, I just mentioned that, I was left in the dark regarding sales figures, how my work was received, how my work was marketed, and what other short story writers my work was blended with to create their latest anthologies. I find that as I grow older, one cannot underestimate how important it is to have control. That is not to say that one shouldn't compromise with working with others. It's just that the ability to put something that is wholly and inherently yours out into the world is as refreshing as it is very rare. During this process, I had complete say as to what the book cover looked like. Shoutouts to my wonderful designer, Sierra Twazin, who also creates the logo for my podcast, The Broken Lords. For taking such a vague concept as make trees look computery and making it her own. How long it would be, and what happens within its pages. That's not to say that it made the process any easier, just difficult in a different way. With a lack of in-house resources, I needed to rely on the kindness of friends and strangers, hire an editor with my own money, and figure out my own public relations campaign, which is why I'm here. With a lack... Okay, anyways, where was I? Oh, yes. It's been an interesting process, and I'm grateful for everything I've learned along the way, even the bad stuff. So, I think I've rambled on quite a bit. Do we have any questions? Do we have any comments? Do we have any concerns? That's... Mm-hmm. So you're saying that for the question for the record, um, that isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So coming from a religious perspective, would this universe being a simulation be in fact superfluous coming from a religious mindset? To kind of repackage the question, is that that's what I'm just clarifying to make sure that I'm answering the right question. Okay. So that's a pretty interesting question. From a theistic perspective, well, it depends. There's many different religious systems that could weigh in on that. Christianity, I would think, because I have a bit of a background in it, would state that the world is in God's design. Now, reading between the lines, it could very well be that the simulated concept of a universe could well be within the design. Who's to say that God isn't like a programmer of some kind? You know? Perhaps he designed this with like cliff notes that we can't read because we can't read the code yet. We're working on it. From a Buddhist perspective, you could argue that, yeah, they've been saying that all along, that everything is in fact an illusion, that everything is a transitory state of mind that we've created for ourselves because we have not learned the underlying universal truth. From a Hindu perspective, piggybacking off that, they would argue pretty much the same thing. That we are God playing hide and seek with itself within the universe. That we are nothing more than manifestations, avatars of this one single Atman, the Brahma. Can't weigh in too much on what Islam would say about this. I'd imagine it'd be pretty much in line with what Christianity says. Judaism would say that God created it, but he didn't say how. Could very well be. So, to answer your question as to whether or not the question is superfluous, I think it's superfluous from the perspective of God, if there is one. I can't weigh in on that. I don't know. I like to think of myself as intellectually honest enough to say that I, with full confidence, have no idea if there is a God. But from a human perspective, I'd say it's very important to us because, in a way, based on our nature, that will inform how we interact with each other. If we see ourselves as artificial representations of an idea and not as flesh and blood, not as fellow thinking human beings, maybe we'd be more inclined to do some more unsavory things to our fellow person. Yeah, to be very nihilistic. To parallelisms, Thomas Hobbes famously was a misanthrope and stated that the nature of man is only contained within the fabric of society. If we discover that the underlying fabric of reality is based on illusory evasiveness, I mean, in a way it is, because it's a social construct that we've all created within our heads. So that's another philosophical argument as to whether or not society is in fact a simulation. That we're all willfully participating in a giant computer program that we constructed thousands of years ago because we decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we stopped roaming around hunting elk? But I digress. So to kind of sum up my thoughts about it, I'd say it does matter because there's a lot of people that would use that as an excuse to do aberrant things. And I think it is intellectually responsible for all of us to figure out if in fact it is true or if it isn't. And if it is, what are the ramifications of that for us as a people? Because I would ultimately, and this is from my perspective, would argue that God ultimately doesn't care how we perceive his reality. So it's not on him to decide, or him, her, whatever, it, who cares? I digress. It's up to us to decide how we want to handle each other. Hopefully that answers your question. Yes, it's important to maintain some semblance of responsibility and accountability because that's really all we have to keep ourselves from becoming animals. Anyone else have a question? Have I written other things and have I had it published by others? Is the question. This is for the record. I'm repeating people's questions so that people have context. Anyways, yes, I have. I am a pretty prolific short story writer. I think I've written about 50 stories right now. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your support. So that was my yeah, that's my friend Mystic for those that don't know. Kyle. Yeah. Under the same pen name, yes. I have a Medium account, which you can find on my website, xubthémad.com. 1D. Look, Capcom is still not giving me back my name. It's kind of infuriating. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, I have many short stories. I've written at least 50. I think half of them have been published in some anthologies. Silent Spark Press. Have a couple with Grub Street, I believe. That's out of Boston, Writers Guild. This is my first O Solomino act when it comes to doing the whole shebang. I'm working on a second novel right now, currently in the works, called Fogstalker, which is a dark fantasy horror that has grimdark elements. And yeah, don't want to talk too much about that right now because it's still within the manuscript drafting phase. I'm pretty far into it, but again, I don't want to say something that's going to make me ultimately commit to the thing I said, and or I forget what I said here, and then I do something that's opposite to what the expectations were. You know, I don't want to do that to myself. So that's all I'm gonna say for it right now. I hope that it comes out next year. That's what I'm shooting for. So perhaps it'll be through this process, perhaps it will be through another process, but we're still in the works. Any other questions? Do you think I'm going to self-publish again? Was the question. Yeah. I mean, it comes like I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the presentation. Self-publishing versus traditional publishing both have its benefits. It's kind of one of those things where you have to weigh the options and the risk. On the one hand, getting into a traditional publisher, very competitive. They must query like 100,000 books a year per publishing house. We're talking about like the big four, you know. But like there's other smaller publications. My friend Ben, also named Ben. What are the odds? Met him at RPM Fest. Met this guy at RPM Fest. Met a lot of good people at RPM Fest. Anyways, is using a smaller publisher in which he is part of a consortium of writers that are basically doing a unionized version of publishing. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to reveal his business model. Also, I don't really understand his business model that much. But he does kind of like his own self-publishing, but within like a traditional publishing format, as it were. He's a very interesting writer too. I'm reading his book, Negative Space. I'm giving him a cheap. I'm giving him like a quick advertisement, and he didn't pay me at all. I think it's a wonderful book. I think it's a horrifying book, in the best possible ways. It is a lucid nightmare of a novel, and I think I understand why we're friends, because him and I. Is it about retail? No. Yeah. 18 years in IT. I feel you, buddy. Yeah. So it has its benefits. On the one hand, like I was alluding to within the presentation, self-publishing is really liberating because you are the ultimate boss and arbiter of what goes down. The only problem is you need to borrow someone's press. And that can be a little costly. Traditional publishing, aside from the renown and prestige you get from being published by Penguin Books or whatever, like I said, very competitive to get into. Also very restrictive. They have clauses in some of their contracts that say that they have the right to change some things if they don't like it. And as a person that believes in creative expression and freedom, as well as the complete autonomy of the artist, I firmly believe that sometimes there are some aspects of it that traditional publishing will not let you budge on. And as a result, your product, cynically your product, but idealistically your art will be altered by outside hands. And that, in the immortal words of Sonic the Hedgehog, is no good. So, you have to pick your poison. Do you want to bust your hump and hopefully get enough traction on your own? Or do you want to borrow the wings of someone else but know that the rental comes at a price? So, any other questions? Do I listen to Brothers of the Serpent podcast? Was the question. I have not heard of it. What's it about? Hmm. Pure. Yeah. Uh, that's a great podcast. Welcome to Night Vale. Very much short horror. Um, through the lens of a radio broadcaster of a small town. Very interesting. Anyways, but yeah, Brothers of the Serpent. I haven't listened to. I'll put it on my list while I'm washing dishes or whatnot. So, thank you for the recommendation. Any other questions? What are some of the struggles I experienced when bringing this novel to fruition? Was the question. Well, Okay, so I have to reveal a little bit about my creative process in order to answer that question. So at the beginning of the presentation, I said that I experienced nightmares. And what usually happens to determine whether or not I'm going to pursue the idea is how pervasive and reoccurring those nightmares are. This one, this one stuck in my head for a while because I listened to that podcast and then I just kind of spiraled at night. Like I was thinking about it a lot and thinking about like the horrible implications that could result as a you know emerge as a result of that happening. So some of the struggles, well, the struggles were I didn't really get a lot of sleep during the time I was writing it. So I guess that was an unexpected, well, for me it was expected, but an unexpected answer to your question. Um, so the other things were okay. So another problem is that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. To kind of illustrate it, Marcel Proust allegedly, according to legend, took 5 years to write a single sentence in one of his novels. I, if left to my own devices and not putting the lash to my own back, would probably do the same. So when it comes to the struggle of that, it's more of a realigning my expectations and understanding that yes, this will have to go out, and no, you can't spend the entirety of your life writing this one paragraph. You dingus. You have to get this book out. So part of it is part of the struggle is learning how to forgive myself. Learning how to forgive the fact that it's not gonna, as I was kind of alluding to it, the realm of forms within Plato's allegory of a cave. I'm not going to one copy the book in the realm of forms. I'm going to have to write my, albeit imperfect, idea of what that book is. And I mean, that's not to say that I believe that I adhere to that philosophy that it does exist. I'm just saying that as part of my mental process, I have to understand that I'm manifesting something as an imperfect creature. And as a result, the underlying work is going to be imperfect. So a lot of it is forgiveness, self-forgiveness. A lot of it is self-care and realizing that it's not always going to come out exactly the way you think. And that might be part of the fun, is having a vision transform and turn into something a little bit more interesting sometimes. So, yeah, that is a bit of a struggle. Holding that ego and putting that rein in check. The other part of it was a little bit more pragmatically time. I wrote the first manuscript of this in 30 days, and pardon my French, it was dog shit. It was abysmal. And that wasn't just me being brutal to myself. That was me going, what the hell am I writing? And what the hell did I just read? And then realizing, as part of the struggle, that, okay, it didn't come out right the first time. We're going to have to rebake the pie. We're going to have to revise it. We're going to have to give it a little bit more legs. We're going to have to add a little bit more crust, a little bit more filling here and there, that sort of thing. So part of the struggle is also realizing that those things aren't going to come out the way that I want them to, but sometimes I have to do something about it, right? So it's a balancing act. It's a, this is good, but can I make it better? I'm trying to make this too good. I need to chill out. So, hopefully that answers that question. Have I fixed my sleep schedule since was the next question. The answer is the answer to that is this one has gone away. However, there's yet another one, and that's the one I'm writing now. So, so it goes. Do I feel my ideas are my own? Are they coming to me from somewhere else? Was the question. I mean, we could have a very long talk about that as to whether or not anything that we construct is in fact of our own, or whether or not we are kind of conditioned through our nurture, our nature, to make definitive things because of our perspective. So there's one axis of that is in fact anything that we consider ours truly ours, or are we just like a regeneration, a regurgitation of an idea that may have come before that subliminally put lodged itself into our brain and we just kind of manifested it out, or as you might be suggesting, the Platonic ideal of a thing that is coming to you like an oracle or something like that. A muse, yeah, yeah, there we go. That's the word I was looking for. If there's like a muse, I would say that if my nightmares are a muse, I wish they would cut it the hell out because I would like to sleep sometime normally in the future. But not to be glib in answering that question, um, I'm not sure. I will say that I am not sure. I think there are a lot of things that we're still in the process of figuring out. You have to keep in mind that we've been around for a relatively short amount of time. To put it into perspective, if the universe, history of the universe, was a clock, we would have arrived about 3 to 4 minutes before midnight. So I would say within that very short span of time, relatively, there's a lot that we still don't understand. We don't understand if there is a God. We don't understand how to even handle other countries, how to handle other cultures. We're still trying to figure that one out. We don't understand what the origins of the universe are. There's some theories. We have some pretty educated guesses as to what might have happened, but we don't know for sure. So, I'll get to you in a second. I'm sorry. I'm kind of wrapping up this question. So the answer is to that, the muse idea, is that I don't really know. What I do know is that there are times at 3 a.m. where something is creeping around and I'm stuck in bed and I have to deal with it. And the way I deal with it is I turn it into this. Because that's really all I can do. I mean, it was a good question. I mean, they've all been good questions. Not to disparage anyone from that, but anyways, yes, another one. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, I mean, it was a good summation of thoughts. I didn't know if there was a question I needed to answer though. But okay, just a peanut gallery comment. It was a good comment though. That's not to downplay it. Unfortunately, no one was going to hear anything that just happened because I'm the one with the microphone right here. So, um, but yeah, it was the concept of art comes from places of suffering, um, and that anything that is worth making is going to have some sense of toil. To kind of summarize a very like a paragraph um, of thoughts there. Any other questions? We are hitting the top of the hour. How long did it take me to write it? About a year. from start to finish. I started in 2023, March 2023. That's when I was started. Like I was kind of backboning it because so what so as a not to say that I was cheating on NaNoWriMo. So what they give you is they give you the option to outline up until NaNoWriMo, and then you write the thing. So I was outlining this guy since March, got to it at November, then it was game time. 30 minutes. God, I wish it was that fast. 30 days for the first manuscript. Then I realized, then I did the second draft in 4 to 5 months. Then I sent it over to my beta readers, who were as brutal as they were kind. Sometimes cruelty is a kindness. About things they liked, things they didn't like, etc. And that took about additional 2 to 3 months. I'm trying to get this timeline right because I'm approaching 4 months of leeway time. That was 3 months of the final draft. This is the one that I got. That I sent back to my beta readers. They returned it with like, yeah, this is great. This is fine. Send it. And the last month of this process was the process of, okay, how the hell do I publish this thing? Let's figure it out. So, yeah, about a year. Everyone bought everything tonight, unfortunately. So here's, yeah, okay, the question was, do you have any more copies? And I have to take this opportunity to talk about my run-in with Murphy's Law. Not only tonight, but this entire month. So, initially, I sent out an author's discount query to Amazon to be like, hey, can I get a bunch of books sent over here in time for my presentation? It happens on the 25th. The 25th. It is coming to me like October 3rd. so yes, that was great. I even talked to the support who assured me, quote, it will be fine, unquote. It is not fine. I am not fine. I am not okay with the fact that I don't have physical copies to sell to you tonight. I am quite annoyed, in fact. The last copies that I had are now owned, so I will get you your copy. I just need a little bit more time. I'm sorry. But you can also do it yourself if you go to xubthemad.com. I need to put that as a little like television jingle. xubthemad.com. Yeah. Yeah. So if you go to my website, there's a little thumbnail you can click, bring you right to the Amazon page. You can buy a copy yourself. So, yeah. I try to make the process as painless and as low-tech as possible, given that, well, I have people in my life that may not be the best with computers. She's getting better. Yeah. This is going to be the last question because I'm wrapping up at 7. Is there going to be a sequel? This is a standalone this is a standalone story. I'd like to think it's self-contained. Without giving too much away, I think the story is done, is how I would say it. My second book, I think, is going to be part of a series. I'm not sure yet. Like I said, I don't want to commit myself to any promises and then ultimately fail to uphold them when I decide that I'm going to go in a different direction. So I don't want to commit myself to that. I just want to say that, like, if there's any possibility of any book getting a series, it's going to be the next one. So, all right. I think that is me. That is 675. Good Lord. 657. So that's been my time. I'm actually surprised that we filled it up quite nicely. When I came in here, I initially thought, oh God, how am I going to fill up an hour worth of content? Uh, I don't know. I like to pretend that I'm all right at public speaking, but anyways, yeah. Thank you all for attending. I aw. I appreciate all of you for coming to listen to little old me yammer on for about an hour. And yeah, uh, if you go to my website, once again, that is xubthemad.com, and get yourself a copy of Render. I hope there will be more down the pipeline to come, but that's the one I have right now, so that's the only one I can sell you. So stay tuned for the rest. Thank you all.